fire, war, and the nature of necessary destruction. Destruction is an undeniable force in nature, history, and human psychology. It isn't just an end, it's a mechanism for renewal, for transformation. But destruction without vision is suicide, and suppression of destruction creates disasters far worse than if it had been embraced in the right way. This is where Hitler failed. This is where Rome crumbled. This is where entire civilizations have fallen, and where forests, when denied the chance to burn, explode into uncontrollable infernos. Hitler's destruction, a death wish disguised as strategy. When we think of Hitler, we think of a man who wanted to conquer the world, but if you look deeper, you'll see something stranger. His choices suggest that he never truly wanted to win. He refused to retreat even when it was the logical choice. He sabotaged his own resources, ordering scorched earth policies that hurt his own side more than the enemy. He rejected strategic adaptations that could have extended his war efforts, preferring destruction for its own sake. Jordan Peterson has pointed out that Hitler's approach makes more sense if we see it not as an attempt to win, but as an attempt to bring everything down with him. This is the pathology of a man who cannot separate his own destruction from the world's destruction. It's a form of nihilism disguised as strategy. The Roman Empire, suppressing fires until they became unstoppable. Rome, at its height, was a force of unimaginable power. It had military dominance, economic strength, and a cultural influence that stretched across continents. But just like a forest where no fire had been allowed to burn, Rome did not allow small collapses, which meant when collapse finally came, it was total. Why did Rome fall? The rot was slow, then sudden. Rome avoided short-term instability at all costs. Instead of facing problems head-on, they delayed, ignored, and bandaged. Corrupt officials weren't removed. Economic problems were covered up with debasement of currency. Military weaknesses were ignored until enemies were inside the gates. They feared small fires, so they created an inferno. The Republic fell because the elite refused to adapt. Julius Caesar simply accelerated what was already happening. The empire itself avoided hard reforms, which meant that by the time real problems hit, collapse was the only option left. Barbarian invasions were the final blow, not the cause. By the time Rome fell to outside invaders, it was already broken from within. Just like a forest overloaded with dead wood, it only took a single spark to set the whole thing ablaze. The burning forest. Why suppressing chaos leads to catastrophe? A healthy forest burns regularly. Fire is not a disaster, it's a natural process. Some trees require fire for their seeds to open. Old growth must be cleared to make space for the new. Animals adapt to cycles of fire, thriving in renewal. But when humans suppress every fire, thinking they are protecting the forest, they create a deadly trap. Dry wood piles up, the underbrush thickens. When a fire finally comes, it destroys everything instead of renewing it. This has happened in Yellowstone, 1988. Decades of fire suppression led to megafires. Portugal and California. Policies that prevented smaller fires created conditions for uncontrollable wildfires. Australia. Indigenous people used controlled burns for centuries, but modern policies ignored this, making fires worse. This pattern repeats everywhere, from war to politics to personal life. If you don't let the small fires burn, you are building a time bomb. Jung's shadow, the fires of the mind. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow self, the part of us we suppress, deny, and pretend doesn't exist. Repressed emotions don't disappear. They fester, growing darker. Avoided conflicts don't resolve, they explode later. Ignored weaknesses don't fade, they become the cracks that shatter us. A person who refuses to acknowledge their own capacity for destruction is like a forest where no fire has been allowed to burn. Eventually, the fire takes control instead of being controlled. Rome never addressed its shadow, it covered up every sign of weakness. But covering up weakness doesn't make you strong, it makes your eventual collapse inevitable. How this plays out in business, society, and life. Business. Those who burn themselves first survive. Netflix killed its DVD business before competitors could. It controlled the fire and thrived. Kodak ignored digital cameras, fearing the destruction of its film business. By the time the fire came, it was too late. Amazon reinvents itself, constantly burning old strategies to make way for new ones. Politics. The governments that fear. Small fires face revolutions. The Soviet Union suppressed every sign of dissent until it collapsed overnight. France's aristocracy ignored the growing unrest until the guillotine came. Smart governments allow controlled dissent, so pressure is released gradually. Personal growth. Destroying who you were to become who you can be. People who fear failure often get stuck, unable to grow, afraid to take risks. Stoics practiced voluntary hardship, burning away comfort so they could handle anything. True success requires burning the old version of yourself again and again. Final thought. Learning to burn without being consumed. Hitler burned everything, but without purpose. He mistook destruction for power, failing to see that destruction without rebirth is meaningless. Rome refused to burn until it had no choice, and by then, the fire was beyond control. A forest that never burns is doomed, but so is a forest that never regrows. The lesson? Master destruction, or it will master you. Burn the dead wood before it burns you. Let small fires cleanse, so you never face the inferno. The real question is, do you control the fire, or does the fire control you?